Hey everybody, what's up? It is another episode of Jordan Tremaine Book Reviews, and today we're going to talk about this book with a pencil on it, which is Daniel Kahneman's Thinking, comma, Fast and Slow. I think as you can tell, this book is pretty thick, but it's pretty good. It's one of those books that's boring and interesting at the same time, which is very hard to achieve. But I did enjoy it a lot. Um, yeah. One of the things that I thought was cool about this book is, let me see if I can find one. Diagrams and pictures to help explain stuff. But yeah, enough of that. Let's get into what it's really about. So this New York Times bestseller book, which also happened to win a Nobel Prize, I think in economics or something like that, or this kind of idea that Kahneman brought with help with some of his friends, is this idea that there's a lot of psychological factors that go into the decisions that people make on a daily basis, and a lot of these psychological factors are not in your favor in a lot of situations. I think this book goes a lot in line with other books that I've reviewed, like Nudge and Sway, where it talks about how there's this idea that we were biologically evolved to make certain decisions in a certain environment, which is a survival setting, like in the jungle kind of thing. But we don't live in the jungle anymore, so a lot of our instincts are not in our favor because we need to think way more ahead. We need to understand the consequences of statistics and stuff like that. And we're not geared to do that. And this book talks about kind of that whole idea of us not being set up to be successful in the modern world, and also line by line of many specific things that are challenges for most humans. So, to start, let's talk about what the title means: thinking fast and slow. Kahneman comes up with this idea that your brain kind of operates on this dual system thing. There's like system 1 and system 2. And system 1 is like this fast thinking, intuitive, fly by the seat of your pants kind of thing, where in most cases your brain is kind of on autopilot, just making decisions and doing stuff, and trying to make stuff make sense and dealing with the day. And that's system 1. And then system 2 is kind of like this deliberate stop, let's slow things down, let's look at the data, let's think about this, does this really make sense, does this not make sense, less emotional kind of logical system. I like to think of these two systems like if you ran a small business, there's the secretary out front that's making all the day-to-day decisions and like trying to keep stuff flowing, and then there's the manager in the back, or maybe it's the cashier and the manager in the back, where the cashier deals with most of the stuff day to day, just making decisions. But every now and then, when there's something that's like a big decision to be made, they're like, hold on, I gotta go get my boss. And that's system 2. And system 2 like sits down and thinks about stuff. And a lot of the examples that Kahneman brings up are about the trouble you run into because you're using system 1 or system 2 when you really shouldn't be. So I think it's very interesting to, number one, establish that your mind has this like duality way of thinking, and you often have the ability, you have the manager in the back, you can think about it and come to good conclusions, which a lot of us know in a lot of situations in our lives where we do things we regret or we didn't want to do. Now that we have all the information, now that we're in the future looking behind, we know I could have figured that out, but we at the time we don't. And why? And sometimes it's because emotions get in the way, sometimes we're making quick judgments, sometimes we're not thinking clearly and all that kind of stuff. And this kind of starts digging into why that is. Is that just you? Is that all humans? Is there anything we can do about it? And then some specific examples of holes that people fall into all the time. So one example of a thought trap, that's kind of what I call them, that people can fall into is ignoring something called regression towards the mean. And basically, regression towards the mean is like, if on average, let's say if on average this is happening. So let's say in golf, because that's one of the examples in the book, on average people score, I don't know how golf works, like 10 points. And on 10 points, 10 points, 10 points. And then sometimes you can score 20 points, sometimes you can score 0 points. If by and large, over all the statistical data, the average is 10 points, then if somebody scores 15 points, it's very likely that in the future they will regress towards the mean and go back to 10 points. If somebody scores 5 points, it is very likely that they will regress towards the mean and score 10 points in the future, where the average is the average for a reason. But then we look at sports betting, and on average, somebody will score this much. On average, everybody in the league ever will have scored this much. But then we see somebody score a little bit higher than normal, like in a tournament on the first game, and we're like, oh man, that guy's got it. We got to bet more on him because he's just better than everybody. When in reality, the smart statistical thing to do is, he scored more above the mean amount. Maybe we should not bet on him because he's actually more likely than everyone else to score worse because he's above the mean. And then vice versa, when somebody is below the mean, it's actually really likely that they will come back towards the average. And this is like when you think about the situation, and maybe if the person got injured, it makes sense that they're scoring low, or maybe if the person is like Kobe Bryant or whatever, it makes sense that they're scoring high. So you gotta like factor in details, but by and large, it's a big thought trap for people to ignore this idea of regression towards the mean and think that, because the stock went up, it's gonna keep going up. And it's like, well, what are stocks doing in that industry? What has historically been the performance growth over time? Is this in any way normal? No, it's very, very abnormal. So why would I expect it to continue? So that's one example. Another example of a thought trap or a fallacy we can fall into is the halo effect, where if you meet somebody and let's say you have this idea in your head of what a good person is, and a good person is like kind, generous, patient, handsome, blah, 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 blah. And you meet somebody, you don't know them, but they fill out two of those things. They're kind and handsome. Your mind is likely to say, this person's kind and handsome. They're probably also generous. They're probably also patient. They're probably also this. And you build this halo around them based on very small amount of information. You attribute other attributes that you think go in that category to that person, when in reality that person may not be any of those other categories, and you may be making very risky character decisions for who you're interacting with. And so by understanding the halo effect, by understanding things like regression towards the mean, it can help us say like, oh man, Wilt Chamberlain is scoring so many points, I want to go and bet on him more, blah, 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 blah. And then if you're like, wait a second, is this like a regression towards the mean thing where if he's doing well, he's probably going to go back to normal? Like, what do I know about the history of basketball and scores and stuff? Actually, this is probably, maybe I shouldn't make a bet like that. Or for the halo effect, like you meet somebody and they're very charismatic and handsome and stuff like that. And you're like, then I could probably trust them. They're probably good with money. They're probably very patient. It's like, actually, no. Somebody that's very charismatic might actually be a liar. And it's very dangerous to just start, without any validation, without any proof, start saying, this person is this type of thing, this type of thing, this type of thing, this type of thing. And the halo effect also goes in the other direction. Like, instead of a halo, you can give them horns, where if you meet somebody that's impatient and, I don't know, angry, you might also think that they're a liar and a bad person and all that kind of stuff. When impatient and angry, they could just be having a bad day, and they could actually be the nice, patient, charismatic, handsome person that you ascribed to the person you put a halo on, could actually be this other person. But it's like you have no proof for why you're saying this person is that or that person is that, and you're just carrying your life on based on system one, which is the person in the front desk that's just making decisions without really thinking about it, and it could get you in a lot of trouble. So Kahneman goes through like bunch of examples of different fallacies like this, and then gives you references to like research it, psychological research and studies and tests that have been done, the history behind how kind of psychology has become more interested in human behavior over time. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is in a lot of the examples he kind of hits hard on, and he even goes very specifically into, in this case, how humans don't do well with statistics. The regression towards the mean is one example of how humans don't do well with statistics, but he goes so far as to go find college professors that teach statistics, that have like PhDs in statistics, that are very like well known, and then look at their research papers and really dig into like how they did their research and understand that their sample sizes were not based on any good statistical data, statistical data practice and stuff like that, and then go talk to them and be like, hey, you're the statistics teacher and you're not even using statistics well. And then once he brings it up to him, they're like, oh, you're right, I'm not. I just thought it was good, so I just moved on. But they didn't actually take a minute and say, hey, I gotta go get my manager. I gotta think about this with system 2. They kind of just shot from the hip with system 1. And even these people that know statistics and teach statistics can still make mistakes, which means for the most people that don't know a lot about statistics and don't have college degrees in it, it's very, very likely that you will make these type of mistakes. So this book, I think, is excellent. It starts getting you online, even if you don't memorize all the stuff in here, which I don't think you can. It's like 500 pages, and honestly, probably at page like 350, 400, I was like, come on, Kahneman, I get it, like, this is good stuff, but this is a lot of reading, so can we, like, stop putting more and more examples? I did get to that at some point, but that doesn't mean the examples were bad. It just meant there was a lot of examples. But what I'm trying to get at is, it's not important to memorize everything in here, but this book really gives you a good sense of like, wow, I have a lot of vulnerabilities. People have a lot of vulnerabilities. It's good to be aware of this kind of stuff, and it helps me be more careful in what I let my system 1 do. It helps me be more like, this seems like something I should think about. Because if you don't, I think if you're not aware of something, it's very hard to act on it. And this book helps raise your awareness of how humans think. So I would highly recommend this book, even though it took me like months to read, and I had to take breaks and think about it and go back. There's a lot of references in here, so I read some research articles to help me understand the background behind some of these studies and stuff, which you don't have to do, because that's all in the footnotes. But I highly recommend, if you're trying to understand a book, you actually read the footnotes, you actually read the appendices, you read the back of the book, the pretext, read the whole book. Like, don't buy a book and then read this much of it and then be like, oh, I understood the whole book, but you never read like the foreword and the appendices and stuff like that. It's like, that's part of the book too. But I think any part of this book that you read will benefit you, but I would recommend you read the whole thing, but don't think this is like light weekend reading. Like I've done reviews like this book. This book is more easy reading, coming up for air. Let's see, another book that's more easy. I don't read a lot of easy reading books, but I think you get the point. This is more of like a textbook, even though it looks like a book you buy at the airport or at Barnes & Noble or something like that. It really reads more like a textbook. So be prepared for that. But textbooks are worth reading. They're not just things that you have to buy in college to pass the class and you never open. Textbooks are books with information. Read textbooks, and it helps you get better at stuff. The people that write textbooks are like the industry leaders in their field, and they've taken time to, as well as they can, write down what they've learned. This is like 20 years of a Nobel Prize winning authors insights and knowledge and experience in 500 pages. I was able to get 20 years worth of experience in like 2-3 months in reading this, which is amazing. So I would say a lot of people discount textbooks, like, oh, that's I'm not a college professor, I don't read textbooks. Textbooks are dope, and they're not the easiest to read, but they're not designed to be easy or fun to read. They're designed to give you accurate information. If you're looking for accurate information, certain books may not be the funnest, but they have good information if you're willing to sit and parse through what they're trying to tell you. So yeah, the book is Thinking Fast and Slow. I would recommend this. This is something that really helps you deal with the world. I think it's very difficult to be alive because there's no manual for how to be alive and how to deal with the world. This book does a lot to help you understand how humans work. And I'm not saying that so you can go around manipulating humans, but it helps you be less frustrated with people because you see what they're dealing with, and it helps you be more patient with yourself because you realize what you're dealing with inside of your own head. It's not the end. This is not the only book you ever need to read, but I think it's a good one, and it goes, if you like the book Sway, if you like the book Nudge, and which I'll put in the description, this idea of like you need to know some basic psychology or you're gonna get messed up. And actually, this book too, Poor Charlie's Almanac, this talks a lot about psychology too. There's a whole speech in here that Charlie did on psychology that like, hey, if you fall into traps, it's gonna be bad for you, so you should learn some psychology. And these books are, let's see, Sway's here. Like these type of books can really help you think clearly and keep yourself out of trouble that you don't need to be in. So yeah, that's it. Put that book down. Yeah, I would recommend this book, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Peace.